If you then will worship me, it will all be yours. The theme for the first Sunday in Lent. And we have it recorded in the various readings. This happens to be the Luke reading of the temptation. It varies a little bit from Matthew's reading. Something that strikes me as interesting according to Luke. Luke has a long genealogy just before he comes to this part of the text. And the end of the genealogy says, son of Adam, son of God. That's how it ends. Then it goes right into the temptation. And here, the devil, after this time in the wilderness, Jesus is hungry. He's been there like Israel, kind of reenacting the 40 days that he has here in the wilderness. Much like Elijah, and also like Moses had time on the mountain for 40 days. And so Jesus is tempted by the devil. And the temptation of the devil is to get Jesus to distrust, to not trust God. His temptation is the same kind of temptation that you and I are going to have in our lives, and we've already had, in that we are tempted to not trust God, to not trust Him to take us through this life. We're going to trust other things. The first temptation is the temptation to not trust God, but to trust something else to keep us alive in this world. That is our temptation. That was Israel's temptation in the past. They were tempted to wonder how in the world they were going to make it. They're in this wilderness. They came up out of Egypt. They didn't have any food. They left rather hurriedly, and all of the business, the drama, crossing of the sea, the Red Sea, the parting, all of this, and then here they are out in the middle of nowhere in the desert. They're human. They're hungry. And so we have the temptation to distrust that God can do anything for them. Same kinds of wildernesses sometimes you and I go through in our lives. And we're also tested by the devil. And we wonder if we can make it. We trust in material things. We trust in bread. We trust in meat. We trust in ham sandwiches. We trust in beans. All these things we eat. Keep going. And so we wonder. We trust in all the material things that are going to keep us alive. We trust in having a job. We trust in God providing somehow. But we don't see where it's coming from. And so the temptation is to not trust God, but to doubt Him. To not trust that He will take care of us, but to doubt that God is on our side. And we go through this day in and day out, in many ways. And so we're going through the same temptations that Jesus went through. The good news, before I get to the good news, I want to elaborate a little bit more. Not only is it a temptation to trust in material things, we also trust then in ourselves. We trust in me. We trust in my ability to get me through this situation. Or we trust in some kind of evil way that's going to keep us alive, not trusting in the God himself who can keep us alive in this world. Jesus is good news for us. You know why? Because he trusted God, and when the devil told him, well, you know, you're Jesus. And remember the last words, son of Adam, son of God. Okay, if you're the son of God, and that's a big loaded term, take these stones here and turn them into bread. It's going to take care of everything for you. Well, think of those people later in your mission. All the things you can do, you're going to have them going with you all the time, you see. Instead of trusting, you see, in God, the temptation of the tempter is to make Jesus kind of trust in some other way than the Father's will for him in this world to rescue and save us. His answer to that is Scripture itself. Man does not live by bread alone, but other versions say, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. That's what keeps us alive. We think it's bread. We think it's the ham sandwich. But you see, it's really God who keeps us alive in this world. It's not just all these material things that you and I add up to think that somehow we've got it made because of that. Another temptation, and that's a temptation to not keep God as supreme, to worship the Lord as supreme above everything else. You and I are tempted in a similar way, like Israel of old, not to trust in God, but to trust some of the gods of the lands in which they lived. They had lived in Egypt. They trusted in the Egyptian gods. And they came, when Moses came down from the mountain, right away Aaron people had gotten to him and said, make us a golden calf. This is the God that can help us in this situation. And so there were different instances along the way where they were tempted not to trust in God, but to trust in something else that would somehow take care of the situation as supreme, and not in the Lord who led them through the sea and led them through the wilderness. And so you and I have the same kinds of temptations in our lives to not trust in God as supreme, but to trust in some other way. Maybe sometimes it's a kind of a cheating, a manipulation. Instead of trusting in God as supreme, we can trust in something that's expedient. We don't have to say God is the one that's in charge of things. We can be expedient about it and not mention the God of Jesus Christ and the Scriptures, but just any kind of a God is fine. And so we can give up and go to some kind of a God that's expedient for us in this world, to keep our popularity, to keep right with our fellow man in some way. And there's this kind of compromise going on in our life. And so that's a temptation that the whole human race has in many ways. With the gods that the devil brings up, and how fortunate we are that we know the true God, the God that's revealed himself in Jesus Christ, who didn't listen to the devil. But when the devil tempted him, he said, it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve.